Saturday, May 30th is today, 2026. There is this political commentator. His name is Edmond Obino.
The Fulani
He made
militant
some
uprising
comments
in Nigeria.
yesterday in his 15 minutes video or thereabout, talking about the imminent counter-attacks against the Fulanis from different tribes in Nigeria. That a lot of people are now being pushed to the wall and they don't have choice to retaliate. He talked about so many things in that video. And if the summary of the video is that he is talking about the imminent civil war that might come if an urgent solution is not being raised against what is going on right now. So, when this video started going viral, something happened that yesterday as well in the heartland of Kwara State, in Lorraine, the state capital. The trucks of Fulanis were intercepted as well, who were coming from the northern part of the country. Police intercepted them, and that raises serious question. The game plan of this agenda to conquer Nigeria is real, but how prepared are you? Just take a look at how people invaded Ilori at night. For what motive exactly?
Ibú ti wọ̀ lọ́rin o, àwọn olórí ibú wọn ti wọ̀ lọ́rin o, ẹ ti rí wọn o, ẹ wá dúró, ẹ wo bá ṣe pọ̀. We have to be very very careful. Situation report ní Ìlọrin. Níbo wọ́n ti ń rọ àwọn eléyìí bọ̀? Ẹ ti rí o, ẹ máa fura o. So we have to be very, very careful.
And this was what Mr. Edmond Obino was talking about yesterday. Are we ready for what is coming?
The Fulani militant uprising in Nigeria might trigger a counterattack from other ethnic groups. That is my worry. And we must check it. Because if we don't, we might pay dearly for it. So let me remind you of the consequences of counter-violence, because Nigeria is edging closer to counter-violence. If counter-violence is not the cure, then Nigeria faces a question more agonizing than any other. How does our people stop the violence that begets counter-violence without becoming the very engine of its own destruction? Look now at Nigeria. Criminal elements, armed, mobile, shadowy, move through the forest and farmlands. They call themselves many things, but Nigeria knows them by the name of an ethnic group, the Fulani. They kill, they kidnap, they burn villages. And in response, ethnic militias are rising. In Yoruba land at the moment, Sunday Igboho is raising Yoruba militias. You can see videos of them moving into the forest. That is how it starts. Why are they angry? Terrorists stormed schools in Orire, in Oyo State, kidnapped teachers, kids, babies. The Berom fortified their hills. The Yoruba vigilantes gather, and each side says the same terrible justification. We are only defending ourselves. They struck first. Let me remind you of July 1966 all over again. Only now The uniform is not army uniform, but civilian marauders. And the admonition remains unchanged. The nation that cannot distinguish between the criminal and the king is already lost. When a Fulani bandit kills a thief farmer, the thief farmer's son does not see a criminal. He sees a Fulani. When the thief militia retaliates, burning a Fulani settlement where no bandits live, the Fulani header's daughter does not see vigilantes. She sees thieves, and in that moment, the actual crime, the original act of banditry, becomes irrelevant. What matters now is identity. What matters now is blood. What matters now is revenge that no one can stop. So, how does a nation break this circle without disarming the innocent? How does it stop the violence that leads to counter-violence? First, the state must reclaim its monopoly on legitimate force. This is not merely a political slogan. It is the very definition of a state. When citizens take up arms because they no longer trust the government to protect them, the state has already failed. But the answer is not to crush the militias with greater violence. That is merely counter-violence by another name. The answer is to outgovern the bandits. It is to deploy competent, ethnically neutral security forces whose loyalty is to the law, not to a region. It is to track criminals by their deeds, not their dialect. It is to invest in intelligence, in rapid response, in rural courts, in roadways that connect isolated communities to the center. The state must become so present, so effective, so just, that the vigilante becomes unnecessary, not because he is suppressed, but because he is obsolete. Second, the Nigerian state must criminalize the act, not the identity. This sounds simple, but it is revolutionary in its implications. When a Fulani herdsman commits murder, he must be hunted, arrested, and tried, not because he is Fulani, but because he is a murderer. When a thief militiaman burns a Fulani home, he must face the same justice. But this requires a judiciary and a police force that have been cleansed of ethnic bias, and that, in turn, requires political courage of a kind that is rare in any nation. It means telling your own ethnic constituency, if our people commit crimes, they will be punished. And it means telling your enemy's constituency, if your people are innocent, they will be protected. This is the only language that breaks the circle. Everything else is just war by other means. Third, and most difficult, the Nigerian state must address the ecological and economic roots of the violence. The Fulani bandits are monsters, no doubt, but they are also men whose traditional grazing routes have been blocked by farms, whose cattle have been stolen by climate change, whose youths have been radicalized by poverty and neglect. This does not excuse their crimes, Nothing excuses kidnapping and murder, but to fight only the symptom while ignoring the disease is to guarantee that new bandits will rise as fast as old ones fall. The Nigerian state must invest in ranching, provide alternative livelihoods, and build trust across the herder-farmer divide. This is slow work. It is unglamorous work. It does not make for dramatic headlines, but it is the only work that ends the circle permanently. Because if we go fire for fire, Nigeria will plunge into a deadly civil war. It is coming if we don't manage it. Fourth, Nigeria must refuse the seduction of collective guilt. This is the hardest lesson of July 1966. Remember, after the first coup, Northerners blamed all Igbo. After the counter-coup, Igbo blamed all Northerners, and 1 million died in a war that ensued. So today, when a Fulani bandit kills, the temptation is to say the Fulani are killers. When a thief militia retaliates, the temptation is to say that the thieves are savages. But these are not truths. They are suicide notes written in the grammar of ethnicity. A nation that succumbs to collective guilt has already chosen civil war, and it is merely waiting for the march. The only alternative is to insist relentlessly, publicly, even against the tide of grief and rage, that a criminal is a criminal, and a civilian is a civilian, and no one is guilty for the sins of their ethnic sibling. Fellow countrymen and women, the Nigerian state must learn to distinguish between defense and vengeance. Defense is the militia that stands at the edge of a village and repels an imminent attack. Vengeance is the militia that crosses into the next valley and burns a sleeping hamlet. One is the right of every human being. The other is the path to July 1966 and to every massacre that followed. The state must defend the first while prosecuting the second. And communities must learn to demand protection without demanding blood. Note, you cannot stop the circle of violence by choosing a side within it. You can only stop it by stepping outside of it, by refusing to let the criminal define your enemy, by insisting that justice is blind to ethnicity, and by building a state so strong in its fairness that no citizen feels the need to become a vigilante. This is harder than revenge. It is slower than rage. It requires patience, trust, and a kind of moral courage that is rare in any generation. But the alternative is not victory. The alternative is an endless July month after month, year after year, each counter-violence birthing the next until Nigeria becomes not a nation, but a graveyard of good intentions. And the only epitaph reads, "They struck first, so we struck back, and then we all died." Break the chain, not with a bigger gun, but with a better nation. A word is enough for the wise. Thank you for listening to me. I am Edmund Obilo.